You probably read the title and went, what the fork, Bridget? And honestly, same. If you want to know how I did that, I don't really know. Can you please also tell me when you figure it out? My only answer would be a bunch of audiobooks from Overdrive and a lack of things to do in quarantine. Reading really made me feel productive, so I spent most of my time doing that. I haven't watched that many shows in quarantine yet. I mean, like this month I've watched a few more, but last month in May, I did not. Hi, I'm Bridget. Welcome to my channel. I talk about books a lot, and I have my computer up here because if you haven't looked at the title, I read 36 books in May. Yeah, I don't know how I did that either. Basically, this is my May wrap up. I'm going to talk about all of the books I read in May, which it was a lot. I don't usually read this much. I know you're probably going, ha, you read so quickly. How could you not? And my goal for this year on Goodreads was 30 books, and I read 36 books this month. So like I read my goal on Goodreads this month. And for comparison, my goal last year was 30 books as well, and last year I only read 33 books in the whole year. I'm gonna give you a moment to let that sink in. I also asked what the fork. So I read more books this last month than I read in all of last year. It happens sometimes, I guess, when you are stuck at home. So I have a whole lot of books here. You can kind of see them like outside the frame. I'm sorry, there are a lot of them and I need them close so I can like pull them up. And I have my laptop open here. Because I read so many books, it's hard to keep track of like the reviews in my mind. So I have them all pulled up here. I started to keep a tracker of how many books I read each month. And when I got about halfway through May, I was like, I could read 30 books in May. And then I could say I read, or like 31 books in May, and I could say I read 31 books in 31 days. Right? May has 31 days? No. Yes. So then I decided to do that when I was halfway through. And then I got ahead of that, and now we're here. I figured we could just start talking about them because this is going to be really long. I'm sorry for the length of this video in advance. What happens when you read a lot of books in 1 month? The video is just going to be astronomically long. So let's just get going. The first book I read was Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. This is a book about a college freshman named Kath, and she is really into this fandom called Simon Snow, which is basically Harry Potter, but not. This book follows her as she goes through her first year of college and how she has to deal with the like new experiences, and like she has a lot of anxiety, so she can't like go to the dining hall without like feeling like so much anxiety, like she doesn't find the dining hall, and it takes her roommate forcing her to go to the dining hall with her to get out and stuff like that. And all the while she's writing fan fiction, she's in a creative writing class and stuff like that. I read this like several years ago, and I really wanted to reread it ever since I got into college, and I've now just finished my second year, so I wanted to read it last year because freshman seems like a good match, but I didn't because I don't know. So I read it this year. I buddy read it with Austin from Oceanic Reads and on Twitter. I had a good time. It was fun. First time I read it was actually in middle school, is what I'm seeing. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I really relate a lot to Kath's story because like she's a creative writing major, I'm a creative writing major, and like I also was obsessed with Harry Potter, and I have a lot of things in common with her that I could really relate to. And having been to college, I can really understand the vibe of college better than I could when I was in middle school and I read it, and I was like, that's so far away. Wild. I've seen more flaws than like the rose-colored memory I have of reading this book, because there are things that are like minor where I'm like, huh? Where like she's in an intro to fiction class and they're like, that's a 3rd year course. And I'm like, how? Like you can take a basic creative writing class in the 1st year of my school, so I don't know how that's a 3rd year class. So I have questions about things like that. But anyway, even though I found like flaws in it, I was like, it's not perfect. But it still made me cry at the end, and like I was still really emotionally attached to the characters. Levi is a gem and I love him. The story is just really beautifully crafted, and I really appreciated going back to college in book form because I've just been really missing college since I had to leave early because of coronavirus. It was a nice reminder of like the journey one takes during college years and how much you can grow during 1 year of college. The next thing I read was Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. It's the 2nd book of the Hunger Games trilogy. If you don't know what the Hunger Games is about, 12 districts, they each send 2 tributes in, fight to the death in an arena, and then the last tribute is awarded. And in this one, Katniss is sent to the arena again. I cried for like half of my reread of this book. Like every time anything happened, I was just like, oh my god! I had a lot of emotions. I love all the tributes. I love that we get to see them, like Finnick, my star. And then like Joanna, and just seeing Peeta and Katniss together again. It's just a beautiful story and I really loved it. And I love seeing it evolving. Cinna is my child. I cried at the transforming dress. That's not surprising because I said I cried for half this book. But like, you know, it happened. Like, it's a beautiful moment. It's a really great second book. Usually in trilogies, second books are like, they didn't do it and it's just like a link between the first and the third books. In this one, you are in it to win it. And it's so well done. It's essential to the story and it does a great job of like keeping your attention. It's still action-packed. It's just as action-packed as the first one and everything, so like I really enjoyed it. So I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. And then I read Wayward Son by Rainbow Rowell. This is the second book in the Carry On series. It's a mixture of the fan fiction that Kath writes in Fangirl and its own story, which is kind of confusing, but this is like what happens to the hero after his journey is over. Like once he saved the world, like what does he do? And kind of how like Simon is just missing something because he has nothing to like live for really, because his whole life was just like, you're gonna do this one thing, and then like no one ever talks about after. So that's kind of what this is. They go on a road trip through America, which is fun. It's really different from the first book, which is kind of to be expected because it's kind of going off on its own way. It really diverged the series from Harry Potter and like the fan fiction that it was in the first book. It didn't really hit the same as the first book. I don't know if that's just me, but like it wasn't as powerful. I did like how we got to see the evolving relationships after the first book and how we got to kind of see what happens after, because usually it's like, oh, then the story ends because a big event has happened and they save the world. And it's kind of like that just started the story. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was okay and I am excited to read the next book. Next up we have Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. Obviously I was finishing my reread of The Hunger Games. I already established what The Hunger Games was about. If you don't know, I don't think you've been around the last couple years. This is a really great conclusion to the fantastic series of The Hunger Games. I thought it's really well done. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The ending, I think some things happen like really quickly and they just gloss over it. Katniss like is overcome with grief and just things happen very quickly and you're like, whoa, hold on. But other than that, it does a good job tying up all the loose ends and making sure everything like makes sense in the end. It does a great job showing character growth, which has been a big thing for me recently. I'm like, the character growth, here we are. I cried a whole lot reading this book as well. And so it shows that I'm very emotionally attached to these characters, even though they're fictional. And I already know everything that's gonna happen. Like, you would think knowing would kind of ease some of that pain, but instead it made it worse. Then I got Red Scrolls of Magic by Sandra Clare and Leslie Chu, which is the first book in the Eldest Curses series. It's one of the Shadowhunter books. It follows Alec and Magnus during the time when they're gone in City of Fallen Angels, which is the 4th book of the Mortal Instruments series. It's very confusing timeline if you're not fully invested in the Shadowhunter world. I really love Alec and Magnus' characters. I want to say that before I talk about anything else. I think I enjoy them more though as the side characters in the other books because you're like, my relief from the other annoying couple because they're really cute. I really liked that we got to see their like relationship grow and unfold in this book because we don't really get to see as much of that because they are the side characters generally in the other books. And the difference between their perspectives was really great because it goes back and forth between the two of them, which I thought was cool because then you got to see like, oh, like they're each having like, their own anxieties about the relationship. The Cold was an interesting like villain kind of plot, but it's not super wowing because of all of the other books that it just creates a higher standard. So this one didn't really live up to that. Also because I already know everyone's gonna be fine because they're in the other books, it wasn't as like, oh, what's gonna happen next? It's hard to do something like that where you're like already know what's gonna happen to all of the characters because like I know whatever they do here, like they're gonna be fine anyway. So like whenever they were in trouble, I was like, it's gonna be okay. I think it does a good job connecting to the other books obviously, but it kind of just felt like a longer one of the novellas, which makes sense. They co-wrote the Magnus Bane series of novellas together, so like it's kind of around that vibe. It's not essential. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was good, but like if I wasn't attached to the characters from all the other books, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This book is about a girl named Eliza and she has a webcomic that's like super popular and no one in her family knows about it and no one in her life knows about it because she's anonymous online. And her parents just think she does this thing for fun and it's like a little thing and no one knows about it, but it's actually like a worldwide phenomenon. Everyone who is anyone knows about this series online and everyone's following it, and she's in high school. Okay, I have a lot of problems with the way she treats her parents in this book because it's so overdone. Like, I understand having annoyance with parents and like them wanting you to do things and you're just like, no, I don't really want to do that. And that conflict, like, I understand completely where she's coming from there, because I also felt like everyone, I feel like, feels that pressure where like they want you to do something and you're not really into it, so you don't really want to do it. That pressure, like, fine. But every other scene was like her being like, my parents suck and they're the worst. And I'm like, they just want you to be happy and they are just trying to help you. And like every scene you see with the parents, they're like this adorable little couple and they just are very happy. And while I understand she has different priorities from her parents, at times she just treats them so terribly when they're just like, we want to help. So I felt like that was a bit overdone, because every time she even talks to her parents, she's like, oh my god, shut up, like, you don't understand. And like, maybe if you gave them a chance, they would understand. I don't know. The relationship between Eliza and Wallace, I stan. It's amazing because he is a fan of her work and he's like one of the biggest fan fiction writers of her stories. And it's so cute. Like, I don't know, like the idea of someone having an online following and then meeting someone else and like that, it gets me every time. And the way that they bond over Monster Sea is just adorable. I really also love the storyline of Eliza working on her webcomic and struggling and having the time to like work on that and everything, because it's obviously something you have to dedicate time to. I kind of related in the sense that like YouTube, I have to spend time on it and people don't really understand that like it's not a very quick thing. Like, you gotta spend hours just like sitting at your computer and like working at it and stuff like that. People don't understand like the time that goes into that. And I get the idea of the people in your life not really understanding that. I feel so much when I read this book. It really means a lot to me every time. There is some parts where I feel like they speed through something really quickly, like when Eliza is feeling really upset about her webcomic and then Wallace comes to comfort her. That all happens very quickly and I'm like kind of out of nowhere, but also like you see where it's coming from. But like, I feel like we need a bit more of her like being upset about everything that had happened. But this book really means a lot to me every time I read it. It just really strikes something within me that I feel for. So I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it the second time as well. I cried during this one as well. You know, the first couple books of this month, I just cried a whole lot. And by the end of the month, I was trying to find that again. Next, we've got The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. This follows 3 different characters. One of them is Alex. Her sister was murdered and the killer walked free and Alex wants to kill him. Then there's Jack, who is like with Alex and they look really cute. And then there's PK, who is the preacher's kid, and she befriends Alex. And they have a really great friendship and everything. And they bond over like working at the animal shelter. And this is happening during senior year, and Alex, she has like these darker instincts because she wants to kill the guy that killed her sister. So obviously something's gonna happen. This book has a lot going for it. It has a lot of important messages. It deals a lot with rape culture and how our society deals with it and how we kind of shut that away. And I think it really brings up some important aspects that we don't usually talk about because we're like, oh, well, that's like taboo. We don't want to talk about it. And it does a good job of showing how one person's actions can affect the rest of the people in a chain. So like, I think that is really well done, and how it's important to stand up for yourself and like what you believe in. I thought the main characters were really well done. Like, you could tell they had distinct personalities, but it just didn't wow me in a certain way. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was Frostblood by Ellie Blake. I don't own it. I just got an audiobook from the library because it had all 3 and I only owned the second one and I wanted to read the series. And so I have Percy Jackson Lightning Thief in the place of it because it's around the same length. So it's just like placeholder. So I did read another book. Just imagine that this is Frostblood. So it's about Ruby, who is a Fireblood, and she lives in the Frostblood Nation, so she has to hide her powers away. Then her mom is killed trying to protect her, and then rebel Frostbloods hook up with her, and they are like, you gotta help us kill the king of the Frostbloods, because he's a bad guy. And so Ruby trains with the rebels, and all the stuff unfolds. It had some really cool battle scenes. I really appreciated that. They were really well written. I enjoyed hearing her describe her powers and the fighting. I thought that was really cool and interesting to listen to. Some of the world building was a bit lacking. It was just kind of relying on the stereotype of fire and ice are the opposites, and like they just fight. And it wasn't really explained like why are they fighting? Like where was the issue here? I don't know. I enjoyed the build-up of the relationship between Ruby and Arcus. I thought that was well done. There was a good culmination of elements leading to them getting together. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book is And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagich. This is like a mystery, thriller, horror, paranormal thing. That was a lot of words that I just used to describe this book. Basically, Scylla and Nori arrive at their aunt's house, and it is haunted, and like the trees are creeping closer to the house slowly, and they believe that the manor is cursed and they can't go into the woods because the bad man is out there. I don't remember what his name is. There's this boy who appears from the woods and he's like helping them, and you're like, who is this guy and everything. So there's like a lot of questions, and then there's like this guy with no eyes who the sister plays with in the basement, and you're like, that's not a good idea, Nori, but she does anyway. I don't often read horror, if that's not obvious by the plethora of books that I have read that are not horror, aka almost all of them. Literally, this is the only horror book I can remember reading. I am very easily freaked out, so it's not very hard to scare me. So like, I'm not into horror in that way. I don't even really watch horror movies unless it's like a really good one, like A Quiet Place. So it did the job of freaking me out, this book. I don't know if I could say that for everyone. It could have just been a me thing where I was just freaked out easily. It was also a very quick read, which I appreciated. It has been on my currently reading. February 2018, I said currently reading because this was like a book club book, I believe. And I read like 30 pages and then stopped and did not finish it for book club. And then I just like skimmed and I was like, yes, I totally read it. I'm sorry, my book club at high school. It didn't happen. But anyway, it took less time to finish it than I thought, considering the fact that it was sitting on my currently reading shelf for so long. Like, why didn't I just pick it up? The middle section of this book became like really repetitive. I felt like a lot of the ideas were just being like repeated again and again. And I felt like we just needed to move the story along. Like, she was just writing things that were just filling the time. Like, she needed a certain number of pages or something. She would repeat things and I'd just be like, I get it. We understand what you're saying. There were many words she just repetitively used time and time again. And I think there really could have been a lot more creative decisions and descriptions of different aspects of the book, because it just got so boring, because it was like she would repeat the same 10 words. It was hard at times to follow because it jumps around so much. I read a few reviews of this book and a lot of people were upset about the formatting. I have an ARC, so like I don't know about the final formatting, but based on this I wasn't as upset about it. At times, I admit, I do think it became a bit much, like she was just relying on the formatting to get you through the book, and I think the formatting should enhance the book, but I don't think you should rely so heavily on it, and I think she really did at some points. I felt like the bold words of the journal entries were really good, and the ending, not happy about it. I could see where it was coming from, like I can understand the ending, but it felt very Deus Ex Machina, where it was like, ah yes, and then this is like, you're good, I'll come out of it. It kind of felt like a cop-out, where I was like, I wanted more from this. Everything was solved by the end. It happened so easily at the end, where it's like, it was kind of almost like it was all a dream, and I was just like, who likes that? No one. That's why no one does it. If you're going to create a situation, I want you to have like a smart way to get out of it, and this just kind of seemed like, well, here we go, here's the end. And yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. So I gave this a 2 out of 5 stars. I had some problems, if you can't tell. And then I picked up Fireblood by Ellie Blake, which is the second book in the Frostblood series. This continues Ruby's journey. With a name like Ruby, how did they not know she was a Fireblood? I don't know. This time she has to travel to the Fireblood Kingdom and get help from the rulers there because they dealt with things in the first book. Of course, then there's like another love interest, which I was not a fan of. They like really tried to like push him in there, and can we just give up on love triangles unless you're going to give them each an equal chance? He was really trying here, and I knew he had no shot. And the first half of the book kind of seemed like the same as the first book, just with a few extra plot twists. So I was like, I'm not gaining anything really new here. It kind of became boring because I was like, okay, like I got this from the first book. How are we going to move on? Obviously, I was not a fan of the love triangle. It felt very forced. If you're gonna have a love triangle, I want you to do it well. And by well, I mean like Infernal Devices well. That's the only love triangle I will stand for, because at this point, like, you always know who's gonna win in love. Like 90% of the time, you're like, oh yeah, and that guy's gonna win. Like the other guy has no shot. I feel like love triangles are so overdone. I'm not a fan. It just kind of felt like a copy of books that have come before, because like everyone's in love with the protagonist because they're just so amazing. Where is the realism here? Also, like, okay, going along with that, but like falling in love with the first guy she meets, okay, can we just meet a few more people? After reading this, I was like, I hope she doesn't continue to try to push this love triangle in the next one, because I could not. I did enjoy the last section of the book. It didn't go in the way I was expecting it to, So that was kind of a little twist for me. It became very interesting in like the last section because I was like, ah, here we go, and things are progressing now. So I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then, you know, because I was feeling up to it and the hold came in on the library, I started reading Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I really loved the TV show that's on Amazon Prime of this. I watched it before I read the book. I know, sue me, it's not a good move. However, the first Neil Gaiman book I read was American Gods, and I was vastly against it. It was one of the worst books I've read, like ever. So I was like very intimidated to read another Neil Gaiman book because I was like, everyone loves Neil Gaiman and I do not understand. I did not like that book. So I had a lot of fear reading another one of his books. I didn't want to hate it again. So I just watched the series and I loved the show. I thought it was really cool. I love David Tennant and Michael Sheen, like they're great. So obviously then I picked up the book because I was like, I need to give the book a shot because I really loved the show so much. I watched it twice. I enjoyed this a whole lot more than I expected I would. I think the show really primed me well for the book because Neil Gaiman did like write the show and like work on the show very heavily, so it has the same exact tone, which was very helpful when getting into this book because I already knew kind of what to expect, and it's very similar phrasing and everything, like the weird way they talk. It's the same as in the show, so like I was mentally prepared for that, and I appreciated seeing like the things that I had seen in the show just happening here. And they do a good job showing the same story just in different ways. It's very whimsical and adventurous, and I really enjoyed it. I really also loved the narrator of the audiobook. He was fantastic. Oh my god, he was great. He really like enhanced the story for me. He was fantastic. Oh my god. I feel like I was more predispositioned to like this book because I had seen the show and liked it so much when it came out. I don't know if I would have liked it as much if I hadn't seen the show, so like that's a fun thing where I'm like, I don't like the show, like it sucks. But I feel like the show really helped me appreciate this book, and having seen the show, it already like allowed me to know how the stories were all going to intertwine. So like I wasn't like, I knew how it was going to end and everything, so I kind of knew how the stories would weave together, so I was prepared to follow it because there's a whole lot of stuff happening in this book. There's like so many different storylines to follow. It can become confusing, and having seen the show, it allowed me to be like, ah yes, and then like this is gonna happen, and like you would understand. So I think if I hadn't seen the show, I would have had a harder time, is basically what I'm saying. So I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. We got This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. It's about 2 different storylines. There's Kate and there's August. Kate is a human who, her father runs the human defense agency thing, and she wants to be just as vicious as him and kind of like fight monsters and stuff, and she wants to prove herself. And then there's August, who is a monster, and he can play the violin really well, and he's part of like the family that runs the opposition to Kate's father. He's one of the 3 most powerful monsters in the city, and so like the city is divided and everything. First of all, that she starts her book with a quote, which many authors do, which is, "Plenty of humans are monsters, and plenty of monsters know how to play at being human," from V.A. Vale. And I just want to say, how iconic is it that she started this book with a quote from her other book, Vicious? Imagine being that iconic where you can just quote yourself. Damn. Also, it's just such a good quote, like tattoo that shit on my soul. So once I started the story, I did not want to stop. It's very addictive. You're like, what's gonna happen next? I don't know. It was a thrilling adventure from start to finish. I really enjoyed it. I listened to the end section of this book on a walk, and literally I shouted aloud. Like I was gasping aloud at things that happened. I was like, oh my god. And then like that. Ah. And like I was just making noises and no one was around me, but I was out here having a wild time listening to this book. I was very invested in the characters. August is an adorable little child and he needs to be protected at all costs. The world is very well fleshed out and like well done, but it needs to be more, in my opinion. There's still such a mystery around August's creation, and like this is all only happening in one city, so like what's happening around the world, I don't know. Kind of building on that, the beginning was very slow because it had to set up the whole world, which is understandable, but like it's still slow. I'm hoping because we set up all that groundwork that the second book will just jump right in. I really want to get the second book soon because this one was so good and it's a duology, so like I want to finish this series. I want more information about like how the monsters are created. I'm like very intrigued by that. And if it affected like everywhere and not just this one city, like how it affects the rest of the world. I don't know if we'll find that out. I hope that all is delved into in the second book. But yeah, there's like a lot left in this world that I'm very excited to see, and I don't know how the story's gonna progress, which is exciting because that, like, generally you have an idea, but with this one I'm like, I don't know, like, man. So I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really good, but there were a few issues that I had with it, which I said. This pile, wow. It's fine. Just ignore it. Next book I read was Werewolf Weekend by B.A. Frade and Stasia Deutsch. It's from Tales from the Scaremaster. Molly saw that I read this and she's like, why? And I was just like, it's a short book that was on my shelf, and I'm trying to read a whole bunch of the books on my shelf because I own them and I want to finish them. And because I decided I wanted to read a bunch of books in May and read 31 books in May, I was like, I should pick up a short book, and this was probably one of the shortest books on my shelf. And it's a children's story, so it'll go quickly. Literally, it's only 168 pages. This is about Emma, who's gonna spend her weekend at her friend Samantha's house, and then she's afraid that her friend's cousins, one of them's a werewolf, and she's like, oh my god. And then she has like this book that tells her stories. So I picked this up for Fun Little Story, as I kind of said. I got this from BookCon, which is why I owned it. It wasn't like I bought it, it's art. So I just had it, and I figured I might as well read it. It was a fun time. If I was younger, I probably would have really enjoyed it. There was an interesting plot that kept me motivated the whole time. However, some of the characters were a bit exaggerated. That could be because it's a children's book. A minor thing bothered me was that it was set in like middle school, and it felt more elementary school to me. You don't have recess in middle school. They really emphasize that she's at recess and like she's doing stuff. And there's no recess in middle school. That's just like a minor thing that like I picked up on, and I was like, that's not how it works. Like that just seemed strange for me. I was like, why don't you just say she has like study hall or something like that? That would make more sense. So there were like small things like that that bothered me. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. Just where I'm at in my life. It wasn't a bad story, I just like had some issues with it, and like it became kind of repetitive, and like I don't know, it's fine for what it was meant to be. Then I picked up Truth Witch by Susan Dennard, which is how you know I was really out here this month, because I also read a fantasy book, high fantasy, you know, it's fine, during this month where I was just reading a whole bunch. It wasn't like I was reading short books. These are thick books, okay? That's what I'm trying to say. Basically, there's the Witchlands, and there's like a whole bunch of different magic, which is very kind of hard and confusing to understand. And Sophia is a truth witch, so she can understand when you're lying, so everyone wants her. And then her best friend is Isolde, who's a thread witch, who can see like the bonds that entangle people. And so they like go on this adventure, and they want to become free, but obviously people don't want them to be free. And then you meet Prince Merrick, who is a wind witch and a captain of a ship, and obviously they go on adventures with him. There's like a blood witch after them. Okay, so like this was like really hyped like a few years ago in booktube, and this book was good. I enjoyed it. It was really hard to get into the world, which is to be expected because it's high fantasy, but it still took like a lot from me to be like, okay, and like what's happening here. There were so many ideas to keep track of. Like I still don't fully understand how the magic in this world works. And at points there were like a lot of info dumps where it was just like, and all of these things about the world, where I was like, whoa, that's just taking me out of the story. I did think the characters were really well built up, and like the magic system, it was a lot, but it was like very fascinating to find out about, but it was just like a lot, as I said. And the relationships between the characters were great. Like that was my favorite part of it. Like the main thing I really did love was the romance, because it's not over the top hit like with it, but like it's a slow build, and you're just like, ooh, like you can see where it's going, but it's not actively like pushing, like it's not overwhelming. It was really tense, and it was built over the course of the story, and ooh, I was here for it. Like the sexual tension and the slow burn of this relationship. It's so good. Like my favorite part was that scene where they finally kissed. Ooh, yes. When they're like, you're the last person I would choose. It's so good. Like when they finally kissed, like that moment, that was my favorite of the book. Like I was here for it. I was so like if you were to only read it for that, like I would be here for it. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The romance really pulled it up for me. And then I read Nightblood, which also I don't own. I only own the second one, as we have established. It's the last book in the Frostblood series by Ellie Blake. So I have Onyx here, but then for Armored Child, because it's a similar length. And so this is like the final book in the series, because it's a trilogy, because like it's YA, and YA loves trilogies now. So like Ruby has transformed her life. She has found the prince and stuff. Like there's like a lot going on. Like I don't want to spoil you if you haven't read the other 2 books, because as we've established, Ruby is a Fireblood and blah blah blah. She has a lot going on where she needs to help save the kingdom, obviously, because there's like a evil deity that she needs to destroy if she's gonna do it. and there's like this wind god that they need to fight against. I thought this was a really good conclusion to the series. It did a good job adding to the mythology of the world in a way that like made sense and like flowed really well. And, like, it was easy to follow, which after Truth Witch you're like, oh my god, what, like, it's anything would be easier. That's not an offense to Truth Witch, it's just saying that like high fantasy is hard and this was like lighter fantasy. And I did like Ruby's progression as she changed throughout the book. I thought that was well done. Like, there's even the kind of unreliable narrator in her that we kind of doubt her perspective as she's going through these things. On the negative side, the first half was quite slow and it really centered on the relationship drama, which, as we've established with the second book, I was not a fan of. The relationship drama I was not here for. Like, I'm here for a relationship drama when it's relevant. Time and time again, Ruby tells the one guy that she loves him and that she is always going to want to be with him. And then they would have a fight over how she's like choosing the other guy when she's obviously not. Like, she has to time and time again tell the man that she loves him and he doesn't believe her. Why would she lie about that? It just made me roll my eyes at how fragile their relationship was, where he constantly thinks that she's cheating on him. When I'm like, there has to be trust here, and he obviously doesn't trust her enough to believe her that when she says that she loves him and not the other guy. It just bothered me. At times, I would just like roll my eyes because he just doesn't think that she can stick to her decision. What the heck, man? You obviously don't deserve her then. So yeah, that really bothered me a whole lot in this book because they really tried to push the love triangle and I was not here for it. 3.5 out of 5 stars. I liked how it ended and like I wasn't sure how it was gonna go, but I really enjoyed that. But the relationship drama really took it out for me. And then we've got our Shakespeare Bar Book Club Pick of the Month. If you don't know, I co-host Read Along with Molly from Magical Molly. It's called the Bard Book Club. You can follow us on Twitter. We have our live shows on my channel every month. So last month we read King Henry, the 4th part 1, which follows King Henry as he goes about in a war, and then his son, Prince Hal, who's like Henry V, and how he gets up to mischief with his friends. I really enjoyed reading this aloud. It was a whole lot of fun. We had a bunch of hats. I'll link it up here like in the description as well because that was a whole really fun time. However, I do have to say I don't think I could have read this on my own. Like, I tried to get into it and just read it straight through. I could not. Like, you need to read it aloud or like see it performed to really understand it. I would not have liked it at all if I had just straight up read it. But like reading it aloud, you're having a good time with it, and like getting to act out the dramatic monologues, like I'm here for that. It was very boring and dry at parts. We talked a lot about it in our live show discussion, so if you want more information about how I felt about it, you can go there because it's 40 minutes long, so that's a lot of discussion time. So our book this month is Hamlet, if you want to join. It's gonna be a good time, and I'm excited because I really like Hamlet. Then the next book I picked up was Wildcard by Marie Lu. This is the second book in the Warcross duology, so it's finished now. It's about Amika Chen. She helped her team win the Warcross group, but then there's like a lot of like scandal involved with it, and she's like a hacker, and she found out some stuff in the first book. The first book was alright. I agree, this one was also alright. However, I probably gave the first book a 5 stars because I gave everything a 5 stars, or I probably didn't rate it. I didn't have many standards for 5 stars. Now I do. I have standards, guys. So now she's like determined to stop this guy who wants to take over the world. Which, like, once you start reading like so many books in a row, you're like, we all just gotta save the world now. That's what books are. It just kind of gets a bit much after reading so many. Someone's put a bounty on her head, so like someone wants to kill her. So then she finds these rebels. So there's like a whole plot there. It was like kind of a mixed thing for me. I enjoyed the evolution of the main characters. I thought that was good. The plot line with Zero was interesting, and seeing how his relationship with the group grew. And like this book really touched on the idea of like what artificial intelligence is, which I thought was cool. It's up and coming, and like we're gonna have artificial intelligence at some point, so like we might as well look into it. I really enjoyed the friendship presented here. The writers are really cute. I wish we saw a bit more of them. Their bond was really great, and it was very sparingly used. Okay, this is my main gripe, is that I feel like Emika doesn't really have any motivations of her own. It's just her following other people. Like, people come to her and they're like, oh my god, this, and she's like, I'll fight for that too. She just kind of seemed to be following what other people wanted rather than being like, I want to do this thing. There were times where she would take charge, but that was just to follow someone else. As far as main characters go, she's very forgettable and doesn't have very many like super defining characteristics that I'd be like, ah yes, that girl. In terms of what she accomplishes and like why she specifically is important in terms of the plot, it doesn't really matter. So I give this a 3 out of 5 stars. If you enjoyed the first one, I think you'd enjoy this one. I also read the first one so long ago that I was kind of like, I don't super remember everything. It was good to end the series. So the next book I read was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is the story of Achilles, the Greek hero, and his friend Patroclus. It's really following Patroclus, who is this guy who is banished from his kingdom, and so then he has to go live in this other kingdom, and then he befriends Achilles and follows him throughout his life, and their love is beautiful. Their bond is just amazing. And obviously then it like goes into the Trojan War, which is really cool. So like the one downside I had with this book was that it was quite slow. I think it was important that it was slow because like it was very purposeful with how I like plotted it out, and it very much sounded like an original Greek tale where like that's how they kind of sounded, is they told this whole grand story. And it was very important to like build up the characters and who they were and how they became friends and like their childhood. So that took quite a while because it spans so many years. Like it spans like 20 or 30 years. So it's like a really long time that you're following these characters, and it really made the book feel like it was written way back then. And obviously like Madeline Miller, wow, queen. She obviously did a lot of research into the Trojan War and like what went into it and like how the story goes, because I could tell that this had so many facts, there were so many names, and like so much happened where I was like, whoa. She obviously did her research and like knew what was up. I really appreciated how meticulous she was about everything. I love the relationship between him and Achilles. It's beautiful. Their dynamic was really fascinating, and the conversations they had were really well done. You could understand where they were coming from. I sobbed like a child for the last 30 pages. Did me in. That pain, when I think back to it, hurts my soul. That's gonna stay with me. Yeah, I think the story was really well crafted. I was a big fan. I'm glad I picked it up. If you're interested in Greek mythology, I highly recommend it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Despite the fact that it was slow, it was like a purposeful slowness, so I was here for it. I just want to say, like, don't think you're gonna rush your way through this book though, because that's not how the story works. Then we got Radio Silence by Alice Osman. This is about Frances Janvier and Aled Last. Frances Janvier is like the main character, and she loves studying in school, and she's in her final year of school, question mark, yes. And she's in England. That's kind of very important because it deals with like English school and like what goes into it. Oh, and then she's like a huge fan of this podcast called University. Aled Last is this guy who lived across the street from her. He goes to university. Just deals with like their friendship as they bond over university. And it's very beautiful. He's the creator of University, so like there's that creator-fan dynamic that I'm really a fan of. Like she has to help create art for it, and it just kind of deals with their relationship. It deals with LGBTQ themes, which is good. It also deals with some hard aspects like parental abuse, which like if you're not prepared for that, don't pick it up because it does deal with some harsh issues. I didn't cry while reading this. I didn't feel super emotional. At the start, it was a bit difficult for me to get into. I think it was the Britishness because I was like, it was kind of throwing me off. But I really appreciated the genuine relationship and friendship between Frances and Aled. Like, they're not going to get together if you think it's a love story. It's not. And it's very forward about that. It's like, we are just friends. And their friendship is beautiful. If you want to read a book about a genuine, beautiful friendship, this is definitely the one for you. It's great. Like, there was no attempt at romance. It was just a boy and a girl being friends, which I really appreciated because you don't often see that in books. The podcast is really interesting. I really liked seeing it blow up and see kind of how that happened. And I think Frances was a really well fleshed out character. As a person who was in college and like kind of went through all those issues of like, what do you want to do when you grow up and everything, like that is a really important topic to read about. And I think they do a good job of being like, you don't always have to choose your first option. Like, you have so many options in the world, and that's really interesting to think about. And like, she has those moments of like wondering if what she cares about means anything and stuff like that, where like I can totally relate to that, which I feel like most people can, where you're like, what is the point of everything? I was hoping to cry while reading this. I did not, as I kind of said. I did shed a few tears, but it didn't have the impact that I thought it would. But it was a very solid book about friendship, which I was here for, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I picked up The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which is the prequel Hunger Games Pan Am novel that just came out, which is like super popular and everything. I have a whole review coming about this book. I haven't finished editing it yet. I filmed for 50 minutes talking about this book. I did not think it was going to be that long, so like, I'm sorry it's not out yet. I wanted to get this video out first, so that's happening. I did do a review for my newspaper. I got this book because I was going to review it for my newspaper, so I got it for free, which was exciting. And so that's up if you want to go check that out. So I'm not going to say like too many of my thoughts like right now. There seems to be two camps here. Either you love it or you hate it. I'm kind of in the middle. I really liked Lucy and Sejanus, and like the history of the Hunger Games, which if you're not into the history of the Hunger Games, don't read this book. It's not for you because it's quite slow. The things I didn't like, the excessive use of songs, how slow and weirdly paced the story was, and at times I was like, where are we even going? I don't know. So that was an issue I had. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, or a B, I believe I gave it on my newspaper website. Then I picked up By Your Side by Casey West. The more I think about this book, the more annoyed I am. I gave it a 3 stars. It's a quick, fun read. It's about this girl who gets trapped in the library. She meets this guy, Dax, who's also in the library, but he planned to stay there because his parents kicked him out because they're like a weed business and they're having like meetings or whatever. I don't know. He's like in the foster system. It's a quick read, which was good for how I was trying to read a bunch this month. Autumn really bothered me at times though. She's the main character. There's Autumn and Dax, and obviously they're gonna get together in the end. He's like this bad boy who like is very mysterious and no one knows anything about. She just bothered me so much at times because like there's this one time when she's like, being locked in the library is probably a dream come true for some people, but not for me. She's like, I guess I could read, and then she never does any reading while she's trapped in the library. Dax is reading at times. He's reading like Hamlet or something, I don't know. Never once did she pick up a book and actually read during her time trapped in the library. As a big book fan, that really bothered me because even if I didn't like books, I feel like if I was trapped in a library and had nothing to do, that would be my main solution, would be to pick up something, and like you have all the time in the world to check out different kinds of books. Why don't you give it a shot? She did not. So that really bothered me. Also the fact that like she got trapped in the library. I know as a person who worked in a school library, we definitely go around and check everyone in the building and like make sure that no one's in there. So I don't know how this could have happened. I have some questions, but yeah. I did like the relationship with Dax and how it evolved and how they were very honest with each other, which was like a solid basis for a good relationship. But some of those things, there's why. So 3 stars. Okay, and then I'm just gonna like kind of talk about the series. So I got the whole I Am Number 4 box set a hot second ago. Like last month when I was on a live stream, I just ended up buying this whole series. It's I Am Number 4 by Pittacus Lore, which is actually like 2 authors. It's like a code name, whatever. The story is really well done. If you like superpowers, like I do, because if you haven't followed me for long enough, I'm a big superhero fan. So I like anything with powers. Renegades is one of my favorite series of all time. And so I remember I read the first 2 books of this series 6 years ago or something, when the movie was coming out, and like obviously you gotta love what's his face, who everyone was like fan casting for everything, Alex Pettyfer. He was in this series, and I remember reading the first 2 books and I really enjoyed it, but like I never like finished the series, so I was determined to finish it now. And so there's 7 books. If you don't know, it's about like these 9 aliens who get sent to Earth, and they can be killed in the order of their number, and then they have to like band together and fight against the evil Mogadorians, which is another planet. The Mogadorians destroyed Lorians. The Lorians had to come to Earth to escape, and there's only 9 of them left, and they're the saviors of their species, so they have to like band together in order to fight against the Mogadorians. The Lorian have powers, which is really cool, obviously, which is why I'm here for it. And our main character is 4. We follow him through most of the books, but then we get other perspectives as we go farther in. We get like 1 perspective here, 2, 3, 4, which is really cool. You get to see through the heads of the other kids. I just want to say there's a lot of stories where people are just named by numbers. I don't know why. I Am Number 4, I gave 2.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was alright. I enjoyed the superpowers and how it began to develop throughout the story. This one though, really info dumpy. You're learning a whole lot about the planet when they're explaining things about Lorien and stuff, which became a bit much at times. The love was very insta-love for me. I was not super here for the relationship. It follows throughout the other books, and like I was like, it's fine. Once they actually developed their relationship, I was kind of more here for it. But like the first time he sees her, he's like, oh my god, she's the best. I was kind of like, chill, man. Also, the ending was super disappointing in this book. He's like, we're surrounded by Mogadorians, and then he passes out and suddenly they're fine and they're in a hotel room miles away, and they like briefly explain how the other guy like pulled him away and stuff. But if they were surrounded, why would you cut away at that moment? I do not know. It was not a good end. Also, like, because a lot of the world building was done here, like you could fully appreciate the other books. Yeah, just the end, I was like, why would you end it like that? Also, I just want to say, like, the series does a good job of like having a cohesive narrative throughout it. Would finish a book and then I'd pick up the next one immediately, and I thought it did a good job of like flowing from one to the next. So Power of 6, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I like this one better than the first, but like we were getting more point of views and more powers, which was fun. 6 is the best. We have no choice but to stand. And the love triangle that we were created, as I said before, not a fan of love triangles, so like, I wasn't here for it. Also, like, Sarah low-key sucked in this book. Then we got The Rise of 9. I'm not going to explain any more of this series because like I feel like anything else is spoilers. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This one had a really fast-paced adventure. The battle sequences were really good. That was like one thing that was really positive about this series. Like, the battles were good. The aliens are called Guard, which means they have powers. And I really like how we got to see them interact and kind of start to meet up in this book, which was good. 4 is slowly coming to his power. Bernie Kosar is adorable. 6, still great. Sarah, alright. Sarah's the love interest. At this one, I was just like, where is Sam the whole time? Also, 9, you're introduced to him in this book. At first, he comes off super arrogant and you're like, I want to hate him. But then there's like the softer side coming out, which I love those types of characters where they're like acting all macho, but then like they're super soft, which is great. And we got The Fate of 5, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars as well. This book flew by really quickly. I loved the different aspects of them training and everything. And the found family aspect of them living together in the tower, wow, I live for it. I liked that we got to see Sam again. 5 is super sketchy. Marina was finally coming into more of her powers, which I was like so here for. I was really here for the end of this book and I wanted everyone to be happy. So the next book is The Revenge of 7. It's the first book in the series. I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. 2, the story became much more intense in this book. Like, I would get invested in like one storyline and then it would switch to another point of view and I'd just be like, but then I'd get invested in that point of view and then I'd be like, when it switched. So like, that was really good that like none of the storylines were like the boring one because they were all interesting. There's a lot happening in this book, which was good. And there's like a lot of great characters that at this point, like, we really love them all. And I even teared up a little bit at the end. I didn't cry, but like there were a few tears in my eyes that I didn't unleash. The plot twist at the end, like, I saw it coming, but I was still so here for it. Damn. Then we have The Fate of 10, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. My main problem with this one is that it's definitely become like a middle book of the series because it's so connected to the others that you couldn't read this outside of it, which obviously like kind of makes sense for this whole series. But there's no storyline that's just in this book. Like, usually when you're making something, like if you're making a TV show and the episode, it obviously connects to the greater plotline of all the other episodes, but it's also its own little story arc in its own episode because it's one kind of entity. So like, while there is like the greater plotline going on, there's still like a story that started and completed in the episode. And this book did not feel like it had that. It's all setting up for the final battle. And every time they'd be like, oh, this is going to be the final battle, I'd be like, no, bitch, there's one more book. Like, it makes sense because you're preparing for the final battle, but it lessens the impact because you know there's going to be one more book after this. So like, this isn't the end. I really liked seeing 4/John learn about his new abilities in this book. I thought that was fun. Fine. Obviously, as I said, I love powers, so like I was here for it. Again, the fights are really good in this series. The end, I'm sure, meant a lot to some people, but as a person who wasn't as invested in that storyline, it didn't mean as much to me. I'm sure it was meant to make you cry, and I was just like, okay. Like, I was sad about it, but like, it was, ultimately I didn't cry. And I'm glad they went for it though. They really were out here. I was very excited by the end of this to see how it was gonna end up. And we have the last book, United as One, which is the other book that I gave a 5 out of 5 stars in this series. It was a really phenomenal way to end a series. While there were still some things that were like left to the unknown at the end of the book, it tied up almost all of the loose strings from the other books really well. And since I read them so quickly, I could see how all of the books became like one cohesive story because it just kind of read as one story. So like, you could bind them up and it would be a good story and you wouldn't really be able to tell the starts and ends of the different books, which was good. This book had a lot of really great moments because it was the finale, so there's like all of this anticipation of like what's gonna happen in the end. One of my favorite parts, the chase through the bunker and the reveal of like the secret weapon. Oh my, like, I just could not stop grinning. When you have a character that you really don't like and then they come back and you're actually super hyped about them coming back, that's how you know you've done a good job creating the story, because I didn't realize until like the end, and then when it happened, I was just so here for it. Like, even though I hate that character, I was like, oh my god, they're back, yes! So that was like really well done, where I was super rooting for him, even though I've hated him all the other times I've seen him. I also really loved John for learning more about his powers, as I said in like the Fate of 10. because it really is emphasized in this book because obviously they're preparing for the final battle. The final battle is almost as epic as I hoped it would be. I wanted them all to be together and they weren't for most of it. So like that kind of wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be, because I thought they were all going to be fighting together against this one guy and like some of them were missing, which I was sad about. I did think the ending with Cedricus Ra was really well done. I thought it was foreshadowed well in the other books, how his life was going to end up and everything. And the epilogue made me tear up a bit. I didn't cry, but like teared up again. And I appreciated the mixture of happy and sad endings with the characters, because that's kind of life. Not everything's super happy, but in the end, we all survived. And I was satisfied despite like the remaining questions. I was very like satisfied with the end of the book and I thought it was a good ending. So that was the whole Lorien Legacy series. I was very happy that I got to read all of them. My library had most of them on audiobooks. The audiobook readers, they were really good. I was really a fan of them. There was like one guy that I didn't like as much just because of how he narrated like one of the characters. I was like, that's annoying. All of the rest of them, they were really great. And then I read Percy Jackson's Greek Heroes. I've had this on my shelf for a while and I finally got the audiobook from the library. As a huge fan of Percy Jackson, obviously I had to buy it and read it. There were so many new stories of heroes that I hadn't heard of in this book, which I thought was really cool. Obviously, I know a ton of different details about heroes because I was obsessed with Greek mythology in middle school. So like I already knew a lot of this stuff, but I liked hearing the new details that I like hadn't known before about some of the characters. I thought that was really good. I wish the book could have been longer so that we could hear about like even more heroes, because he selected like 12 of the heroes that he would talk about, and I like wish there were more, because there's so many heroes that I know about from mythology that we didn't obviously get to touch on them all, because otherwise the book would be a million pages long. And I really enjoyed how the stories all came together kind of in the end. I thought that was a good way of doing it, and I thought it was a fun time. I obviously really enjoy how Rick Riordan tells it through Percy's voice, which is fun, and so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I wish there was a bit more, but I enjoyed what I got. And then we have the final big series thing that I read, and that was the Saga Compendium. So it has it's a bind up of the 9 Saga volumes. So I'm just going to quickly go over how I felt about each of the volumes as they were. I counted them as individual books, which means that they were 7 of the 9 books that I read this month. Volume 1, there was a lot going on and you get introduced to so many characters and you're like, oh my god, there's so many people. I love that it's told from their child's point of view. Adorable. And the characters are already really complex, so it's like a good start to the series. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Volume 2, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. The art, beautiful. It's beautiful throughout, but like this one I especially noticed it. I was invested in all of the storylines, which is very impressive to do. And it's cool how they like match up and like meet each other, because you're following so many different people that like when they meet up you're like, ooh, there they are. And I enjoyed seeing how the family dynamic continued to evolve, because obviously I'm here for the family. And the plot really thickened as the characters kind of got closer together. However, I feel like some of the plots were forgotten a bit that were like already done. Like we didn't get to see everyone, because obviously you gotta focus on some. And then we got volume 3. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed how everything came clashing together in this section. There wasn't much happening in this one, because it seemed like part 1 of like the story was kind of coming to a close, but I was excited to see what happened next, and I like how all of the characters in their groups are coming together. Volume 4, I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. It was different from all the other ones. It dealt with very real problems within the relationship that we've grown to love. It was very fast paced and kept me want to keep going. The cliffhangers were here. Volume 5, I gave 4 out of 5 stars also. The dynamics are shifting because the groups are mixing it up, and it's like when they clash is also like the most interesting parts to me, because I'm like, ooh, how are they gonna interact with each other? Also, Goose, my favorite character. I love him. Volume 6, 5 out of 5 stars. The plot threads clashing together, which is what I've just been saying for all of them, but like here we are. The family moments in this one, I was here for it. They warmed my heart. I also really enjoyed seeing them deal with trauma, because it's all here. It's also fascinating to see how time has gone by. Seeing the child grow up, wow. I mean, first it's like a blob, and I really laughed a lot about that, but like as you see her grow, wow, she's adorable. It's also interesting because time has gone by, there's like a shift in the characters because things have happened that we haven't seen, so that's cool. Volume 7, 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know how people waited, because the ending of this one, wow. I also wasn't as big a fan of the Fang story because it kind of felt like detached, but I liked the new ideas it started. I did finish Saga, but we can talk about that in my June wrap up, because I need some books to talk about then. So I finished the other 2, but yeah, just like some overall thoughts about this. Saga is also obviously really good. Everyone on BookTube and the internet really loves Saga, from what I've seen, and I understand why, having read it now. It's a really great story. You really get attached to all of the characters and how they intertwine and everything is what I've been kind of saying. It's really well done. It's really a cohesive story, so you can see how all of the characters like match up and like where it's kind of going. But also now, like at the end, like I did cry, I will say that. Man, I need more after this ending. I highly recommend if anyone's interested. However, I will say it is kind of graphic, so like if you're not ready for that, like if you're a child, I would not pick it up. But once you feel mature enough, definitely check it out because it's pretty good. So yeah, I read 36 books this month, guys. Are you shook? Because I am. Hold on, let's put them all together. I'm not holding them all up because I think I would actually die, but I will stack them next to me. Now I get to put all of these on my shelf. Wow. I've had them all on their own separate shelf because I wanted to make sure they were separate because I wanted to keep track. Wild! I realized I never filmed an outro for this, so here's me trying to take a thumbnail. And please like, subscribe, and comment about your thoughts on these books. Thanks for watching. Bye.